The Open Russian Cosmos, Reaffirming Russo-centrism and Orthodox Foundations in the Global Sphere. Without denying the complex origins of Russian civilization, which has creatively absorbed a multitude of influences, it is important to avoid terms and concepts that suggest the secondary nature of our civilization. I find both the terminology and the substance of the Russia-Eurasia concept unappealing. The very name Eurasia, besides being, in my opinion, phonetically unpleasing, implies Russia's secondary status in relation to both Europe and Asia. Yet Russia is a fully self-sufficient name that requires no further clarification. Substantively, Eurasianism, in its attempt to reject the West, makes such a sharp turn toward Asia that it sometimes borders on an undue reverence for it, occasionally even identifying Asia as Russia's forebear. It is no coincidence that one of the foundational historiographical myths of Eurasianism is that of Russia as the heir and successor of the Golden Horde, whereas, in reality, Russia was formed in opposition to the Horde, not as its progeny. Some Eurasianists even view Russian civilization as Turkic-Slavic, to the delight of proponents of Greater Turan. At the very least, Eurasianists posit the equal significance of the Slavic Russian and other components of Russia's multi-ethnic population, although, in the later works of Alexander Dugin, this seems to be less pronounced, but I will be sure to ask him about it when we meet. Without denying the complex origins of Russian civilization, which has creatively absorbed numerous influences, I believe we should avoid terms and concepts that imply the secondary nature of our civilization. Moreover, I find it unacceptable to embrace concepts that give undue significance, and here, even equality is excessive, to secondary ethnic influences at the expense of the Russian, Slavic Russian, core. As for European influences, whether religious, philosophical, or artistic, they have been so thoroughly reinterpreted by Russian civilization that they can no longer be called European but Russian. The same applies to the influence of non-core ethnic groups, if such influence existed at all, which is far from true for all cases. Given this, I will turn to the issue that, it seems, at least some Eurasianists are trying to address, finding a unifying force. With the important caveat that I reject the concept of Russia-Eurasia, I will attempt to address what appears to be an important goal for Eurasianism: the search for a unifying factor for Russia's diverse, multi-ethnic, people and an attractive force for those beyond its borders. In my view, this task is effectively addressed by the concept of the Russian world in its philosophical and civilizational understanding. I will reiterate my own definition: the Russian world is a spiritual and cultural community of all those, whether Russian or not, whether living in Russia or not, who love Russian culture and history, who know or respect the Russian language, who share Russian spiritual ideals, who are Orthodox Christians or who hold Orthodoxy in high regard. The Russian world is a spiritual, cultural, and partially geographical space shaped by the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian people, ethnos. This space also encompasses other religious communities and ethnic groups connected to the Russian people through shared or partially shared worldviews, spiritual and moral values, history, culture, and more. The geographical core of the Russian world is historical Russia, Holy Rus, but the Russian world is not confined to its territory. The openness and appeal of the Russian world have been well articulated by Yegor Kolmogorov in his January article, The Russian World as a Russian Idea. He writes, "The Russian way of life and way of thinking, which combine steadfastness in tradition and common sense with bold dreams and progress, resistant to the aggressive totalitarian Tolrasti and colonial hegemony of the West, are very attractive even in the West itself, among normal people." He also discusses Russian ideals that can attract others. I won't retell everything, I suggest reading the article. Alongside the concept of the Russian world, I find the term Open Russian Cosmos, proposed in 2022 by a group of young intellectuals from Donetsk, in the rehabilitated sense of the word, particularly fitting. At least part of this group, if not entirely, is connected with the Eurasian movement. With all due respect to the term's authors, who seem to infuse it with a more Eurasian concept of equal coexistence among various ethnicities, I interpret the Open Russian Cosmos as denoting the same Russian world, but in a more modern, more youth-oriented form, making it appealing to younger generations. The name Open Russian Cosmos indicates an openness to all the peoples of historical Rus, who today are part of the Russian world, and extends an invitation to like-minded peoples and communities worldwide to join. While this openness is implied in the concept of the Russian world, it is not explicitly stated. In contrast to Eurasia, the term Open Russian Cosmos emphasizes Russo-centrism, that is, the central importance of the Russian, in the narrow sense, Slavic Russian, people, culture, history, and language. While Eurasia suggests the derivative nature of Russia and the equal unification of its components, the Open Russian Cosmos, like the Russian world, is semantically Russo-centric, which is crucial for preserving our civilization. The Russian people, culture, and language extend an invitation. They are undoubtedly open, but they remain the unifying force. Finally, Cosmos conveys an aspiration towards the future and the heights, overcoming the limitation of mere steadfastness in tradition by combining this steadfastness with a bold dream and progress, a key characteristic of the Russian world, see Kolmogorov's quote. And once again, this makes the concept terminologically appealing in a contemporary sense. I cannot stress enough, the Open Russian Cosmos is a cosmos founded on orthodoxy and can only be sustained within orthodoxy. While orthodoxy is not imposed, it must be openly and firmly presented as the foundation for the journey into this cosmos. An African country joining the Open Russian Cosmos is not required to embrace orthodoxy, though, as a priest, I must say that it would be beneficial and salvific for them. However, such a country would clearly and without reservation understand that it is joining an orthodox world, cosmos. I believe that, in theory, the aforementioned Africans would not be opposed. After all, one is much more willing to join a civilization whose faith is strong. The loss of faith, for the Russian world cosmos, this means the orthodox faith, the decline of religion as a societal force, as brilliantly analyzed by Emmanuel Todd, leads within 2 steps to the disintegration of society and to nihilism. I will write more about this at another time. Failing to recognize this threat when discussing the Open Russian Cosmos, or assigning it an exclusively secular meaning, seems to me a grave mistake. Postscript. For further reflection on the concept of the Open Russian Cosmos, a remark on the use of the word in the Bible. In the Bible, we find several uses of the word cosmos. 1. According to the Slavic translation, means adornment or beauty. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array, Slavic adornment, Greek cosmos, Genesis 2:1. And in a negative sense, and the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity, Slavic adornment, Greek cosmos, James 3:6. Incidentally, as a brother more knowledgeable in Greek than I am pointed out, from this semantic root of the term cosmos, we get the word cosmetics. In any case, the usage in Genesis implies that cosmos is a part, not the whole. It is the contents, not the container. There is also a biblical use of the term cosmos in another sense. The world, Greek kosmos, did not recognize him, John 1:10, meaning in the sense of a multitude. In several patristic interpretations of James 3:6, the term cosmos is understood in this same sense: world, multitude. By combining these 2 usages, we can say that cosmos is not some limitless container. On the contrary, cosmos is a limitless content, which can be true beauty or deceptive beauty, an illusion.